My name is Gary, I'm 65 years old, and I thought I knew my wife Sharon better than anyone. We lived together for 40 years, raised 2 children, survived all of life's hardships side by side. But what happened last year changed everything forever. I worked as a mechanic at the Ford plant for 35 years until I retired 2 years ago. Sharon worked as a nurse at the local hospital. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Detroit where everyone knew each other. Our neighbor Mike, a 57-year-old divorced man, moved next to us 3 years ago after his divorce. At first, everything seemed normal. Sharon helped Mike settle into the neighborhood, sometimes bringing him homemade food. I was even glad she had a new friend. After retirement, I started spending more time at home, and I thought she needed social interaction. But then strange things began happening. Sharon suddenly became interested in gardening and started spending hours in our yard, especially when Mike was in his. She said she was discussing plant advice with him. I didn't pay much attention to this. Isn't that normal for neighbors? The first warning bell rang when I noticed that Sharon started going to the gym. At 61, she suddenly decided to take care of her health. When I suggested going with her, she said it was her personal time for reflection. Fine, I thought, everyone has a right to privacy. But the strangest thing was that Sharon began criticizing my lifestyle. She said I had become too passive, always sitting in front of the TV, having no ambitions. It was painful to hear after so many years together, but I attributed it to a midlife crisis. The truth was revealed in the most unexpected way. One morning I decided to surprise Sharon and make her breakfast. Going into the kitchen, I saw her phone on the table. She had forgotten it while rushing to her morning jog. A message from Mike the gardener lit up on the screen. "Can't wait for our meeting today, darling." My heart stopped. I didn't want to believe it, but instinct told me I needed to act. I took the phone and read their correspondence. What I saw destroyed my world. They had been meeting for a year and a half. Sharon wrote to him that I was old and boring, that Mike was younger and more active, that she deserved a better ending to her life. The worst part was that they were planning how Sharon would leave me. She wanted to take half of our property and start a new life with Mike. In their correspondence, she even joked that, "The old fool suspects nothing." I realized I needed to act wisely. Instead of making a scene, I decided to play a long-term game. I put the phone back and started watching. Every time Sharon went for a jog or to the gym, I followed her from a safe distance. They met at a motel on the outskirts of town. For 2 weeks I collected evidence. I photographed them entering the motel together, recorded the times of their meetings, copied their messages. But I wasn't going to just expose them. I had another plan. One evening I told Sharon, "Honey, I've been thinking a lot lately. Maybe you're right, I've become too passive. I want to change my life." She was surprised but seemed to like it. The next day I signed up for the gym. I started going fishing with old friends from the plant. I enrolled in Spanish classes. I had always dreamed of learning this language. I started jogging in the mornings. In a month I lost 15 pounds and felt much better. Sharon was initially surprised, but then it seemed to upset her. She expected me to remain the same boring retiree, and I suddenly became active and interesting. In their correspondence with Mike, which I continued to read, she complained that I was changing in the wrong direction. After 3 months of my transformation, I was ready for the final move. I organized a meeting of all old friends at our house for a barbecue. I invited all the neighbors including Mike. Sharon couldn't object without raising suspicions. During the party, when everyone was in a good mood, I approached the microphone, I rented a sound system for the special event, and said, "Friends, I want to thank everyone who helped me during these difficult months of personal change. I especially want to thank our neighbor Mike, who got so closely acquainted with my wife Sharon." Silence fell. Everyone looked at me with incomprehension. Then I pulled out a folder with printouts of their messages and photos near the motel. This evidence helped me understand that some people deserve special thanks for showing me the true face. Sharon first denied it, then started crying, then attacked me with curses. Mike tried to escape, but friends from the plant stopped him. All the neighbors saw this scene. By the end of the week, the entire neighborhood knew about their affair. But the most interesting part started then. Sharon packed her things and moved to Mike's the next day. She was confident she would start a new happy life with a younger and more active man. However, Mike turned out not to be so romantic when they had to live together every day. He was used to the freedom of bachelor life and didn't want serious commitments. A month after her move, neighbors reported hearing their constant quarrels. Meanwhile, I continued changing my life. I joined the fishing club, started going to dances for seniors where I met many interesting people. My Spanish improved quickly, and I even planned a trip to Mexico with a group of like-minded people. The funniest thing was that after 3 months, Sharon started calling me. At first about property division, but gradually the conversations became longer. She complained that Mike turned out to be selfish, that he didn't want to spend time with her, that she was bored. "Gary," she said during one of these calls, "I see how you've changed. You've become so interesting and active. Maybe we could try again?" I smiled into the phone. "Sharon, you were right from the beginning. You deserve a better life. And so do I. It just turned out that this better life is without you." We processed the divorce through lawyers. Sharon got her share of the property, but much less than she expected, because I had transferred part of the assets to the children in advance as a gift. Mike dumped her after 6 months. It turned out he was looking not for a serious relationship, but just for fun. Sharon was left alone in a rented apartment, while I thrived in my new active retirement. The last time I saw her was 6 months ago at the supermarket. She looked tired and aged. She approached and again talked about the possibility of reconciliation. I looked at her and said, "Sharon, the best gift you gave me was showing me that I can live without you. And this life is much better. Now I'm 66 and I'm happier than ever. I have hobbies, friends, plans for the future." And Sharon, she still regrets her decision. But some bridges, when you burn them, cannot be rebuilt. But let me tell you more about what really happened during those months when I was secretly planning my revenge. The details of how I orchestrated everything were far more complex than I initially revealed. During those 2 weeks of evidence gathering, I didn't just follow them to the motel. I hired a private investigator, an old friend from the plant who had started his own security business after retirement. His name was Jim, and he owed me a favor from years back when I helped him rebuild his car engine for free. Jim was thorough. He not only photographed Sharon and Mike at the motel, but he also discovered that this wasn't Mike's first affair with a married woman in the neighborhood. Apparently, Mike had a pattern. He would target lonely wives, seduce them, enjoy the thrill of the affair, and then move on when things got too serious or complicated. Jim showed me evidence of Mike's previous affairs with 2 other women in nearby neighborhoods. Both marriages had ended in divorce. Both women had been left heartbroken when Mike lost interest. This information gave me even more ammunition, but more importantly, it made me realize that Sharon was just another victim of a practiced manipulator. This knowledge changed my approach. Instead of just wanting to expose them, I wanted to ensure that Mike's pattern was broken and that other potential victims would be warned. I also wanted Sharon to face the full consequences of her choices, not just the immediate embarrassment. So I expanded my plan. While I was transforming myself physically and socially, I was also setting up Mike for a much larger fall. I started casually mentioning to other neighbors how helpful Mike had been to Sharon, how he seemed to spend a lot of time helping the lonely wives in the neighborhood. I planted seeds of suspicion without making direct accusations. I also started documenting everything more systematically. Not just the affair, but Mike's behavior patterns, his interactions with other women, his financial situation, which Jim had investigated and found to be precarious. Mike was behind on his mortgage and had significant credit card debt. The transformation I underwent wasn't just physical. Those Spanish classes led me to discover a passion for languages. I started learning Italian too, and joined an online community of language learners. Through this group, I met Maria, a 58-year-old widow from Phoenix who was learning English. We became pen pals, sharing stories about our lives, our challenges, our dreams. Maria had also gone through a difficult divorce after discovering her husband's infidelity, but her story was different from mine. She had rebuilt her life with grace and dignity, focusing on her own growth rather than revenge. Our correspondence helped me gain perspective on my situation and realize that while revenge felt satisfying to plan, true healing would come from building something better. The fishing trips with my old plant buddies became a crucial part of my emotional recovery. These men, who had worked alongside me for decades, became my unofficial therapy group. They listened to my story without judgment, offered advice when asked, and mostly just provided the solid companionship that I realized I had been missing. One of these friends, Danny, had gone through a similar situation 5 years earlier. His wife had left him for a younger man, and he had initially been devastated. But Danny had rebuilt his life in ways that inspired me. He had started a small business restoring vintage cars, traveled to places he had always wanted to see, and eventually met someone who appreciated him for who he was. "Gary," Danny told me one evening as we sat by the lake, "the best revenge is living well. But sometimes before you can live well, you need to clear the air completely. Make sure there are no loose ends, no what-ifs, no unfinished business. Then you can truly move forward." This advice resonated with me and influenced how I planned the final confrontation at the barbecue. I wanted it to be complete, definitive, leaving no room for doubt or future manipulation. The weeks leading up to the barbecue were filled with careful preparation. I coordinated with Jim to have all the evidence professionally organized and presented. I practiced my speech, rehearsing different scenarios depending on how Sharon and Mike might react. I even consulted with a lawyer friend to ensure I wasn't exposing myself to any legal issues with my planned revelation. But the most important preparation was emotional. I spent time with a counselor, something I had never done before but found surprisingly helpful. The counselor helped me understand that my anger was justified, but that how I channeled it would determine whether I emerged from this situation better or bitter. The counselor also helped me prepare for the possibility that my revelation might not go as planned, that people might react differently than I expected, that Sharon might try to turn the situation around on me. We role-played different scenarios, helping me stay centered regardless of what happened. The night before the barbecue, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the 40 years Sharon and I had shared, the good times as well as the bad. I thought about our children, our grandchildren, the life we had built together. Part of me wondered if I was making a mistake, if there might be another way to handle this situation. But then I remembered Sharon's words in those text messages, calling me old and boring, laughing about how I suspected nothing. I remembered her planning to take half of everything we had built together while mocking me behind my back. The hurt turned back to determination. The morning of the barbecue, Sharon was nervous. She kept asking me why I was going to such trouble, why I had invited so many people, what this special occasion was. I told her it was just time to celebrate the new phase of our lives, to show everyone how much I had changed and grown. Mike tried to decline the invitation initially, claiming he had other plans. But I insisted, telling him that as our closest neighbor, his presence would mean a lot to Sharon. The irony wasn't lost on me. As guests arrived that afternoon, I felt a strange calm descend over me. This was it, the moment months of planning had led to. I watched Sharon and Mike trying to act normal around each other, the careful way they avoided direct interaction while simultaneously being hyper-aware of each other's presence. My old friends from the plant were there, Danny, Jim, Carlos, and several others. My neighbors were there, the Johnsons from across the street, the Martinez family from 2 houses down, Mrs. Chin who lived behind us. Even some of Sharon's colleagues from the hospital had come. The revelation moment was even more dramatic than I had planned. When I pulled out that folder and started reading from Sharon and Mike's messages, the silence was deafening. I had expected shock, but the depth of the reaction surprised even me. Mrs. Johnson gasped audibly. Carlos shook his head in disbelief. Sharon's colleague Jenny looked like she had been slapped. But it was the look on Sharon's face that I will never forget, first confusion, then recognition, then a desperate kind of panic as she realized what was happening. Mike's reaction was different. He looked angry rather than ashamed, as if he were the one being wronged. This confirmed everything Jim had discovered about his character. He saw nothing wrong with his behavior, only with being caught. The aftermath of that barbecue was swift and dramatic. By the next morning, Sharon had packed 2 suitcases and moved in with Mike. She left a note saying she was sorry I had to find out this way, but that she couldn't live a lie anymore. She claimed she had found real love with Mike and deserved to be happy. What followed was a period of intense activity on multiple fronts. The divorce proceedings began immediately. My lawyer, recommended by Jim, was excellent, experienced, thorough, and sympathetic to my situation. Because I had documented evidence of Sharon's affair and her plans to deceive me financially, we were in a strong position. But the legal process was just one aspect of what was happening. The social fallout in our neighborhood was significant. Sharon and Mike became pariahs almost overnight. Neighbors who had been friendly with both of them suddenly became cold and distant. Mrs. Chin, who was particularly traditional in her values, made it clear that she no longer considered Sharon welcome at neighborhood gatherings. The Martinez family, who had young children, were uncomfortable with the example Sharon and Mike's behavior set. Even casual acquaintances began treating them differently. Mike's reaction to this social isolation revealed more about his character. Rather than accepting responsibility for his role in breaking up a marriage, he became increasingly defensive and hostile. Neighbors reported hearing loud arguments from his house as he and Sharon fought about the situation they found themselves in. Meanwhile, I was experiencing a kind of liberation I hadn't expected. The secret I had been carrying for months was finally out. The pretense was over. I no longer had to watch Sharon getting ready for her gym sessions or her gardening consultations, while knowing where she was really going. The support I received from friends and neighbors was overwhelming. People brought me meals, invited me to social events, checked on me regularly. I realized that while I had been focused on Sharon's betrayal, I had been surrounded by genuine care and friendship all along. My children's reaction to the divorce was complex. Our daughter Lisa, who lived in California, was shocked but ultimately supportive. She had noticed that Sharon seemed different during recent visits but hadn't been able to pinpoint why. Our son Mark, who lived closer and visited more regularly, was angry, not just at Sharon, but at Mike for deliberately pursuing a married woman. Both children offered to come home to support me through the divorce process, but I assured them I was handling it well. This was true better than I had expected, in fact. The months of preparation and planning had helped me process much of the emotional turmoil in advance. The divorce negotiations revealed more about Sharon's mindset during the affair. She had consulted with a lawyer months earlier before I discovered anything, and had been planning to file for divorce on grounds that would maximize her financial settlement. My evidence changed everything, shifting the legal landscape significantly in my favor. Sharon's attempts to claim half of our assets were complicated by the prenup we had signed years earlier during a period when we were refinancing our house. Neither of us had thought much about it at the time, but it included clauses about infidelity that now became very relevant. Mike's financial problems, which Jim had uncovered, also became a factor. Sharon discovered that the man she thought was more active and successful was actually deeply in debt and at risk of losing his house. The dreams of a comfortable future with him quickly evaporated. 6 months after the BBQ revelation, Sharon called me for the first time since moving out. She was crying, saying she had made a terrible mistake, that Mike had thrown her out, that she had nowhere to go. She asked if she could come home, promised she would do anything to make things right. I listened to her entire plea without interrupting. When she finished, I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "Sharon, I appreciate your honesty now, but it's too late. The time for making things right was before you betrayed our marriage, not after your backup plan failed." She argued, pleaded, promised to change, to go to counseling, to do whatever it took. But I had moved beyond anger to a place of clarity. The woman I had been married to for 40 years had shown me who she really was during this affair. The person begging on the phone was someone I no longer knew or trusted. The conversation ended with Sharon accusing me of being cruel and unforgiving. She said I was punishing her for one mistake, that I was throwing away decades of marriage over a temporary lapse in judgment. But I knew it wasn't one mistake or a temporary lapse. It was a deliberate, calculated betrayal that had been going on for over a year. After that call, I changed my phone number and instructed my lawyer that all future communication should go through him. I needed to completely close that chapter of my life to fully embrace the new one I was building. The transformation I had begun as part of my revenge plan had taken on a life of its own. The Spanish classes led to a trip to Costa Rica with a language immersion group. The fitness routine I started resulted in the best physical condition I had been in for years. The social connections I made through various activities created a network of friends richer than I had ever had. Most surprisingly, my correspondence with Maria had evolved into something deeper. When she suggested we meet in person, I was nervous but excited. We arranged to meet in Santa Fe, a place neither of us had been but both wanted to see. Meeting Maria was a revelation. She was intelligent, kind, and had a strength that came from surviving her own trials and emerging better for them. We spent a week exploring Santa Fe together, talking about everything: our past marriages, our children, our dreams for the future. Maria's approach to her ex-husband's betrayal had been different from mine. She had focused immediately on rebuilding and moving forward rather than on revenge. But she understood my need for closure and justice, and didn't judge me for the path I had taken. "The important thing," she told me as we watched the sunset from our hotel balcony, "is that you didn't let it make you bitter. You used it as a catalyst to become the person you were meant to be." When I returned home from Santa Fe, I felt like a completely different person from the man who had discovered those text messages on Sharon's phone. I was confident, active, socially connected, and optimistic about the future in a way I hadn't been in years. The divorce was finalized shortly after my return. Sharon received a settlement that was fair but far less than she had hoped for. Mike had already moved away, unable to handle the social consequences of his behavior in our neighborhood. Sharon moved to an apartment across town, effectively disappearing from my daily life. The final encounter I mentioned earlier at the supermarket was indeed the last time I saw Sharon. She looked older, tired, and somehow smaller than I remembered. When she approached me, I felt a mixture of emotions, not anger anymore but a kind of sadness for what we had lost and what she had thrown away. Her attempt to reconcile was half-hearted, as if she knew it was futile but felt compelled to try. When I told her that the best gift she had given me was showing me I could live without her, I meant it completely. As I walked away from her that day, I realized that my revenge had been more complete than I had ever planned. Not because I had hurt her, though I had, but because I had freed myself to become someone better. The affair had been the end of my old life and the beginning of a new one that was immeasurably richer. Now, a full year after that barbecue revelation, I can say with complete honesty that Sharon did me a favor. Her betrayal forced me to examine my life, to challenge my assumptions about what I wanted and needed, to discover capabilities and interests I never knew I had. I'm planning to propose to Maria next month. We're thinking about splitting time between Detroit and Phoenix, maybe spending winters in warmer climates and summers near the Great Lakes. My children are thrilled about Maria. They see how happy she makes me and how much better my life has become. Sharon, according to mutual acquaintances, is still single and struggling. She lost her job at the hospital due to some workplace drama related to her personal life. She's working part-time at a clinic and living in a small apartment. Friends who have seen her say she seems lonely and regretful. Do I feel sorry for her? Sometimes. But I've learned that sympathy for people who make destructive choices can't come at the expense of your own well-being and growth. Sharon made her choices knowing the potential consequences. Now she has to live with them. The most important lesson I learned from this entire experience is that betrayal, while painful, doesn't have to define you. It can destroy you if you let it, or it can reveal strengths and possibilities you never knew existed. The choice is yours. I chose to let it make me better, stronger, and ultimately happier than I had been in years. And that, I believe, is the sweetest revenge of all. Thank you for watching this video. I see that 99% of you are still watching videos without subscribing to the channel. Perhaps YouTube will no longer offer videos from this channel in the future, so I recommend subscribing. This will also allow me to see what stories you are interested in, which will motivate me to release new videos. Also, keep writing in the comments what stories you would like to hear. I try to read all the comments and choose topics for videos that appeal to the maximum number of subscribers. Now you have a playlist on your screen where you can find more stories that were released before you found this channel. You can also go to the channel and watch them there.